Ancient Egypt's rise in the harsh and inhospitable Sahara Desert may have surprised some. The ancient Egyptians regarded the Nile River as the origin of all life. Ancient Egypt would not have been possible without the Nile River. Our civilization wouldn't exist today if not for the pyramids, the Sphinx, and other treasures they left behind. Without the Nile, much of Egypt would be uninhabitable. The river is home to a wide variety of aquatic and terrestrial species and a large number of people. People living near and around the Nile River revere and fear many animals that inhabit the area. Ancient Egyptians even revered some of these beings. Everything necessary in Egypt is located near or on the banks of the Nile. The oldest country in the world has a lot to offer. Check out these fascinating facts about ancient Egypt. Number 1. Thutmose I and Thutmose III were two of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. Thutmose I ruled Egypt for 3 years between 1450 and 1455 BC. Nubia was conquered by Thutmose I, bringing Sudan into Egypt's expanding empire. Thutmose III, his grandson, continued Egypt's expansion in the opposite direction after his father's death. Thutmose III conquered Palestine and Syria as he marched north into the Mediterranean coast of Asia. He also changed policy, at least about his conquests in Asia. Nubia was ruled by an Egyptian ruler appointed by the pharaoh to represent him. On the other hand, Thutmose III allowed local rulers in Syria and Palestine to retain their thrones as long as they paid regular tribute to the pharaoh. Number 2. There has never been a complete ancient Egyptian tomb discovered than Tutankhamun's. As soon as Howard Carter discovered the tomb in 1922, it had already been raided by tomb robbers in Upper Egypt. It wasn't just that they had taken the treasures from the pharaoh's graves and their queens, they had also damaged the mummies. The mummies had been stolen in some cases by tomb robbers. However, tomb raiders had previously targeted Tutankhamun's tomb, and Carter estimated that the items recovered from the tomb only represented 40% of the total amount of treasure buried with the pharaoh. Despite this, the mummy of the pharaoh and some of his treasures, such as a model boat, several chariots, and a meteoric iron dagger, were able to remain in the tomb. 2 of the pharaoh's stillborn children were interred with him and their mummies in his grave. Archaeologists have yet to discover another tomb as well preserved as Tutankhamun's. Number 3. Agricultural production was the foundation of the ancient Egyptian economy. Wheat was the primary crop harvested in ancient Egypt, and it was used to manufacture a wide variety of bread. The barley grown by ancient Egyptian farmers was utilized to manufacture the beer that became such a valuable product. As a result, laborers were willing to accept beer as remuneration rather than grain. In addition to being placed in graves as funerary offerings, barrels of beer were inscribed with their recipes as part of the texts on the tombs themselves. Flax, which was used to make Egyptian linen famous throughout the Mediterranean, was another product farmed in ancient Egypt. It is still a key export for Egypt, and it sells for a high price on the international market. Other food crops included garlic, leeks, lentils, lettuce, squash, and papyrus for paper. Number 4. The ancient Egyptians traded all over the world. Ancient Egypt's principal export was grain, which they sold to their neighbors, importing ceramics from Palestine and gemstones from India and Central Asia in return. They, in turn, exported a variety of commodities and raw resources. Wood from Lebanon, a scarce and expensive resource in Egypt's desert climate, was also imported. Besides wine from Greece, Palestine, and Syria, they also imported wine from the Middle East. Punt in East Africa was also a source of spices and diamonds for ancient Egyptian traders. Number 5. To this day, no one understands the ancient Egyptian language. Egyptologists have rediscovered the consonants employed by the ancient Egyptians. These researchers also discovered an ancient Egyptian language's sentence structure and how words change tenses. In terms of the vowels of the Egyptian language, this is the most challenging part. According to Egyptologists, the Egyptian language featured at least 9 vowels, including 3 short vowels and 3 long vowels. As a result, it is currently impossible to communicate fluently in ancient Egyptian. Number 6. Hygiene was critical to the ancient Egyptians. They took frequent baths with animal grease and chalk soap. They also shaved their entire body and used a variety of ointments to keep their skin soft in the hot, dry atmosphere of Egypt. The first toothpaste ever created was prepared from dried iris flowers, pepper, and rock salt. They had to use their teeth to apply toothpaste with no toothbrushes around. Number 7. Egyptians had certain traditions when it came to clothing. For one thing, children went around naked until the age of 6. But even before then, they wore protective amulets and jewelry. The ancient Egyptians also preferred to wear plant fibers usually linen, as they saw animal fibers like wool as ritually unclean. However, those who were rich wore overcoats made from wool but took them off before entering sanctified places like temples. Ancient Egyptians, in general, preferred not to dye their clothes. Instead of keeping their natural color, enslaved people usually worked naked, but most workers wore a linen loincloth. Number 8. Ancient Egyptians had plenty of ways to pass the time. Music proved especially popular among the upper class, provided by various instruments like flutes, harps, oboes, and trumpets. Ancient Egyptians, in general, played different board games such as sheet and then, although the rules became forgotten with the fall of the Roman Empire. Juggling and ball games proved especially popular among children, while wrestling proved a common sport in general. Number 9. Ancient Egypt had a powerful military. Archers made up their most effective soldiers, trained to move quickly and in formation. This allowed them to keep their distance from the enemy while also aiming and firing effectively in large numbers. Other soldiers had the job of helping keep the enemy away from the archers, usually with spear and shield combinations. The ancient Egyptians also used a specialized sword called a khopesh, which had a design to compensate for bronze weaknesses, which they used from New Kingdom times onward. Egyptians also adopted chariots, usually used by nobles and officers, to deliver the killing blow against an enemy army. Ancient Egypt also had a powerful fleet but used different tactics than the Greeks and Romans. Greeks preferred ramming tactics at sea, while the Romans favored boarding actions. Instead, the ancient Egyptians kept their ships at a distance, using archers to rain arrows down on enemy crews. Number 10. The ancient Egyptians had an advanced grasp of mathematics. For one thing, they used the same base 10 numerical systems we use today. They also had a complete understanding of arithmetic, decimals, and rational equations. Ancient Egyptians even had their form of algebra to solve quadratic equations. They also calculated the Pythagorean theorem centuries before Pythagoras formulated it. Surprisingly, archaeologists note that recovered ancient Egyptian manuscripts have little about geometric theory. This led them to think that the ancient Egyptians' mastery of geometry focused on the application instead of theory. The precise arrangement of ancient Egyptian monuments and the use of the golden ratio in the area of the Great Pyramid's base provide evidence for this theory. Number 11. Egyptians had an advanced grasp of medicine. Even the Greeks and Romans looked up to the ancient Egyptians regarding medical science. Egyptian doctors remained in demand across the Mediterranean until the fall of the Roman Empire. They used a variety of medicines to prevent infection and wounds and had a basic understanding of sanitation. This led to them insisting on clean and fresh linen when it came to bandages. Doctors also had advanced treatments for burns, how to conduct surgery, set bones, and even perform amputations. Amputees could expect prosthetics to replace lost limbs, while surgical patients had plenty of painkillers. The ancient Egyptians still had their share of superstition when it came to medicine, especially for diseases their doctors had no cure for, such as malaria. In those cases, patients could only pray to the gods for healing.